Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the TEP Sigmund Chess Tournament 2026. This is a tournament held in Sweden, and Magnus Carlsen is participating a bunch. He's participating a bunch with a bunch of other top players. This is the third round recap out of 7, and I will be covering the game Magnus Carlsen versus Abdusattorov, as well as the other interesting battles of the round. So, multiple storylines in this field, such as will Erdogmus continue his climb up to 2720? Will Andy Woodward make a statement? Will Nojibek get to number 2 in the world? Will Magnus win the tournament? Will he cross 2850? Whatever it is. In this game, he is playing against Nojibek Abdusattorov. They recently played a World Blitz Championship final match. That was very exciting. That was about 5 months ago. And Magnus opens up their classical encounter. The last time these two played in a classical chess tournament, I don't know. Probably been like 4 years minimum. Nojibek plays a Queen's Gambit declined, and he doesn't respond with e6, but he declines it with c6. He plays the Slav defense. The idea of the Slav defense is to take on c4, then play b5 very quickly, or bishop f5 and e6. Historically here, white can play knight c3. That's the traditional line. White can play e3 and bishop d3 and castle. White can play the symmetrical, although that's kind of not really what you play if you want to play for a win. Or you can play queen c2. Queen c2 is a very funny move because if black takes, now you take with the queen, and then later you prepare the central pawn advance, and you get 2 pawns in the center versus just 1 for black. So while d takes c4 is completely reasonable, it's not required. And here, Nojibek plays g6. But g6 is kind of a mini win for white because you forced your opponent to develop the bishop this way. And if you play e3 in the future, the bishop is not really going to break through the center anytime soon. So you've kind of gotten your opponent to commit to something they otherwise might have not done. And then we get pawn takes, pawn takes. So now we have symmetry, except we have asymmetry, because even though there's symmetry here, black committed to this and this and this. And white will not be committing to those same things. And this is the position that Magnus chooses to play. He develops the knight, Nojibek also, he develops the bishop, Nojibek also, he develops the pawn, Nojibek castles, and white plays bishop e2 with the intention to play castles. Bishop e2 also allows black to play something very provocative, and I actually have a feeling that during this game, Magnus was kind of baiting his opponent into playing this. I think Magnus here could have played the move h3, which is not just about preventing this and not getting back rank mated. Your bishop gets away. And in the game, by going here, I think he was baiting Nojibek to play the move knight h5, immediately chasing this bishop where it would not escape. I think Magnus wanted a position where he would kind of do something like this and potentially get something like this on the board, which is very combative, very double-edged. Black gets a bishop pair, but a potentially weak king. But Nojibek did not play how I thought he would. He played a waiting move. So he didn't play knight h5, and white now gets kind of the best possible setup, which is this is no longer a problem. Maybe in the future, he can even generate his own attack, depending on where he puts the king. So from the opening, I thought, well, Magnus is doing the typical Magnus stuff, which is play a line, deviate early, force the opponent into positions where every move there are different decisions to make. Already he is getting Nojibek to play in a kind of uncharacteristic way. Of course, Nojibek is a very flexible player. He's happy to adapt to his surroundings, but if Nojibek was playing a 25-40 rated player, he would have played knight h5, I think. Regardless, we have bishop f5, and now we have something very funny. So the bishop attacks the queen, and the queen obviously can drop back to the home square. Or you can proceed to move the queen 4 times in the next 5 moves. So first we go here. Self-explanatory. Black goes here, attacking the queen and defending the pawn. We go here. Self-explanatory. We're targeting 3 different things, but none of them are actually hanging. Black now plays rook e8. Now, rook e8 looks like a very mysterious move. What on earth does rook e8 accomplish? You cannot push this pawn. So what are you trying to do with the move rook e8? To understand rook e8, you have to have a very high IQ, not just chess elo. You have to be very, very sophisticated and intelligent. The idea of rook e8 is to free the f8 square for the bishop to come back and to target the queen for the pawn to move and attack the bishop. And the queen actually doesn't have an easy way to get away. It has to go to d1 and then all the way over here. And so castles happens. Nordjurbeck plays bishop f8. Magnus plays queen a4, b5, and the queen returns to the home square. Now, folks, let me be very clear with you. If any of you played chess like this and I was your coach, immediately, absolutely not. 15 moves of this game, the queen has moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 33% of the moves have been with the queen, and it is on its home square. It literally didn't move. It figuratively, metaphorically, it literally moved, but basically didn't. It's as if Black got 5 extra moves during this game. But the thing about those moves is those moves are knight c6, knight a5, b5, which could be weakening, bishop f5, which could be a target, and bishop back to f8. So 5 extra moves for Nordjurbeck and yet no advantage, which is kind of fascinating. Now he plays knight c4, trying to justify everything, b3, and the knight goes to a3 to camp out. In this position, the computer wants g4 first. It wants to kick the bishop away and then go b3, because if you play knight a3 in this version, I can overtake the diagonal, try to lock away this piece, and maybe try to move forward like this. The computer is really obsessed with the concept of trying to play g4 here. In a lot of symmetrical kingside castle positions of Queen's Gambit declines, there's these lines where you target the bishop on f5, particularly when I cannot go there as a result of putting your pawn on g6. But all this happens, b3, knight a3. The thing, though, about this position is Black is completely fine. His structure is very good. You'll notice that Black traded his light squared bishop, then put 7 pawns on light squares, which means the light squares are completely protected, insulated. Very tough for Magnus to actually do anything. He plays rook c1 to try to take control of this file after moving his knight, and then he obviously tries to move his knight. And it's kind of like normal. He's doing typical Magnus stuff. The knight is on e5, but Black is ready to trade a rook and then trade the second rook. And that's going to be the idea. Like, everything that Nordjurbeck has done is very nice. The knight is planted there. It's preventing white from making any progress. This is a closed position. How do you know if a chess position is closed or open? Very simple. Look at the number of pawns. Pawns are like a fence. Both sides have 7 pawns. That means both sides have built up a very formidable fence. The only opening of the fence is here. And in a closed position, you're looking at piece maneuvers and pawn breaks. And that doesn't exist. There's almost no way to maneuver your pieces anywhere. And there's no way to trade pawns almost anywhere. So Magnus is trying. I mean, he's looking for e4, g4, trying to control the play a little bit. Nordjurbeck, by the way, look at this maneuver. He pushes the pawn and gets the knight out. That is nice maneuvering. Now here's another maneuver. As they try to go to c5, they found some maneuvers here. Okay, we have some rook trades coming up. Solidifying his queenside is Nordjurbeck with a5. Magnus bringing his king. In closed positions very often, you can often play tennis. You can just hit the ball back. This is very much a move that changes nothing about the position. f6 also doesn't change too much. It does weaken this pawn, but there's no way to attack it, and he's also generating his own pawn play. That's another example of pawn play and maybe taking space for the future. Okay, so Magnus is kind of trying to accomplish something, but Nordjurbeck does a nice maneuver here, rook, and then puts the queen behind the rook, and ultimately, you know, even though Magnus is able to break into the position over there, there's not too much here. And the pieces are sort of locked. You've got, it's like a wrestling match. You got the hands on the shoulders, but nobody can really do anything. And the pieces get traded. Magnus activates the queen, but in doing so, he leaves the king wide open, and the game is simply going to end in a draw. Now, you could even trade the queens here, but there is no need for this. Sometimes you get into a pawn endgame, you might lose it by accident. If white gets over here, it's not going to happen, though. I gotta tell you, this was a great game from Nordjurbeck. Very effortless, it seemed. Draw with the black pieces against Magnus. Magnus did not have a strong opening idea here. Yeah, just a very chill game from the potential future #2 in the world. Also, future #1 if Magnus retires in the next few years or stops playing in tournaments. I don't think Magnus will lose 60 rating points, but Nordjurbeck is one of the best players in the world for sure. and they move up to 2 points, you know? Now, the other person who's leading this tournament is the 15-year-old, he might be 16 at this point, 15-year-old from Texas, Andy Woodward. And in his spare time, he is driving the Ford F-150, of course, and barbecuing and other American traditions. And Jordan is, yeah, I mean, he's recently had a massive resurgence. Very creative player in the opening, and this game did not disappoint. Andy started with d4. Jordan baited him with d6. d6 allows e4, at which point black either has to play a Peer's Defense or a Philidor, both of which are kind of suboptimal compared to the other mainline openings. But Andy kind of gets, well, I don't know what the right word is, but like excited and goes rook g1. Now, rook g1 nowadays is completely playable in the Philidor, and basically you take advantage of the fact that black's bishop is out of the game, so you try to go g4 and g5, and you sacrifice the right to kingside castle. Now, let me tell you something right now. In my e4 course, I recommend the line with h3 and g4, and the bishop going to g2. In general, these pawn kind of advancements versus a passive setup work extremely well up to master level. So if you are looking for some sort of g-pawn stuff in any line, really, I highly recommend what you're going to see in this game. The thing is, though, his opponent, who plays the Philidor, is very, very well prepared. He is very prepared for what's about to happen. He goes for this g6 idea. He's still baiting g5, but Andy reconsiders here. And because he reconsiders for so long and like plays a3 after spending 20 minutes, Jordan punishes his g4. He plays h5. So Jordan catches the young Woodward in some sort of like, I don't know, back alley under the canal water, you know, coffee shop, wink, wink in Amsterdam type of preparation. Yeah, like he gets Andy playing some crazy stuff like rook to g5. You can bet that this position has never happened, ever, in professional chess or in amateur chess. This is wild stuff. I don't know what is going on here. He's offering him a trade of rooks. The thing is, you got to think on your own. The computer doesn't like this because after this trade, it thinks that the ensuing position with knight to h5 is very strong, and Jordan actually continued this way, targeting the knight. And now you have to play h4 and effectively sacrifice a pawn. That's what Andy's doing. So he's basically like, Jordan, go take my pawn. Then I'm going to come back. I'm going to long castle. I'm going to have 2 bishops and more open space. Very engine-like thinking. I have to tell you, back in the day, the masters of the 20th century and early 2000s would have never played like this. Ever. Nobody plays like this. But nowadays, like the cost of a pawn when the trade-off is losing the bishop pair and potentially having to play a position like this is substantial. Now, in this particular position, if black plays energetically and white gets to castle and black continues to play with energy, the computer still thinks that the position here is very, very reasonable for black, even though you are a pawn up, but a little passive. And it doesn't think that white has sufficient compensation. There is a way potentially to take a pawn back. That is what you shouldn't blunder. But the computer is not trying to do that. I'm sure there are even lines where it would happily put its king in the middle of the board. And this is totally normal. Jordan, for whatever reason, doesn't do that. He plays knight e5, which gives white enough time to defend himself. And even though he generates some initiative, this counterattack is very nice. He ends up kicking out the knight and trading. And as utterly stupid as this pawn structure looks, and let me tell you, it is extremely ugly and extremely stupid, somehow it's okay. Somehow it's survivable. It's very difficult for black to actually push anything forward because these pawns will be weak. And that means the knight and the king are going to be weak. Jordan ultimately settles for this type of position. Andy undoubles his structure, and now it doesn't even look bad at all. This is just going to be weaknesses. These 2 and maybe these 3. The bishop's weak. h5, long castle. I actually like white's position now, and quite soon you can trade the bishops, and the queen comes off the board, and now we have an endgame, and yeah. Nothing really happens here. We just get opposite colored bishops, 4 pawns versus 5. This is a draw with eyes closed, preferably with eyes open. And yeah, neither side can make any progress here because your pawns are all on the wrong color. The bishops will defend or counterattack. And Andy draws as well, and he maintains first place. It was a very exciting game, but it was only a very exciting game for like 15 moves. Now, this game was quite interesting. Zhu Jiner, she clearly came with an opening idea here to try to surprise Erdogmus, who's the strongest 14-year-old in the history of chess, stronger than Magnus at the same age. She went for knight f3 and e3 and b3, and he developed his bishop. Kind of crazy. He spent 5 minutes on the third move, obviously surprised by the opening. But the good thing about this setup for black is that there's really nothing that can go wrong here. Zhu Jiner, she played like this. She played h3, d3, knight bd2, and then she went for c4. So she, you know, both players were out of their preparation. But instead of going the more positional way, which would have been something like castles, she immediately forced the trade of bishops, which he declined. And already black is better. Black is better because the way that white advanced was incorrect. Instead of c4, white should have actually went for e4. And by going c4, you've weakened this pawn, and you've actually limited the mobility of your pieces going forward. Here you actually had a chance to liberate your pieces. This pawn could get to e5. This pawn can't really get anywhere, which is probably why in this position, instead of castling and maybe just having a slightly worse position, she goes for g4. And g4 is a very, very aggressive move here. White is not going to castle. White is going to go rook g1, h4, g5, h5, and maybe long castle. So now he's going to have to deal with an attack. He ends up spending 24 minutes being like, I don't think that there's any attack here. I'm just going to short castle. That's how I'm going to handle this. And she goes rook g1. And so the idea is obviously h4, g5, h5. Now, let me tell you, for blitz, I would love this. This would be fantastic for blitz. But in classical, oftentimes you put your pieces on squares. This is my experience. Then your opponent makes moves like e5, and you do this, and then you sit there and go, I kind of wish chess had takebacks. Because now you cannot castle. You have this, but you're not ever opening up the bishop. And Erdogmus is just like chilling. I mean, he's just kind of sitting there. Maybe he'll play b5, a5, a4. Maybe he's just going to trade this bishop. Like, he's waiting for white to prove there is something here. She goes a3, which stops the bishop from coming down that diagonal. He stops b4, so he limits the play over there. And also, he's looking at b5, potentially. The c6 pawn supporting both pawns. White plays queen c2, kind of another waiting move. He also plays a waiting move, just stabilizing the center. And at some point, white will run out of moves. White has done everything, but there are no more moves, which is why white plays bishop f3. There are no more moves. You can only now make moves back and forth, and only black can make progress with moves like knight c5, dc, d4, e4, b5, b4. So he goes here, she goes e4, and now a big mistake here for black would be pushing. Not a huge mistake, but if you lock the position like this, you severely restrict your pieces for the duration of the game. And then you have to rely on stuff like this. You're going to make the position very closed. This also makes the position a bit closed, but it forces a decision out of white, who takes with the d pawn. And now at least you have some openings. The d file is open. The d4 square is open. You can maneuver a bishop there. And black at least has some play. Knight h7, knight g5. Like I said, in closed positions, you're looking for backwards reroutes. You're looking for pawn play. And white's bishops just aren't strong here. So now rook d8 from Erdogmus, bishop back to e2. He moves the king off of the g line completely. And now he actually starts fighting back on the g file. So the exact flank that white has established a potential attack on, he is now countering. That's bad. She plays rook f3. He plays knight d7, bringing the knight back and trying to put the bishop on this diagonal instead. Knight back to f1. Now the knight goes to h5. The bishop lost touch with the diagonal, so the knight immediately jumps in. It's like every move for black is a punishment in response to what white is doing. She goes knight e3, knight f4. That's a very annoying knight, and the white king is just in the middle. The white king cannot castle. Knight f6 is a problem as well. White can't castle because that pawn on a3 is potentially just going to be captured if that happens. So he goes. So now, yeah, Erdogmus is taking over. She ends up sacrificing a pawn. She's trying to do this to activate the queen a little bit and the c4 square, knight c4. But I mean, and she finally gets to castle on the 28th move. But you're a pawn down, and black has all of the initiative. Knight to d5, total domination here. Queen is going to come into f6. b5 finally hitting the knight. You probably shouldn't take on a5. Knight e3 was played. And knight e3 she played with 2 seconds, but knight c3 is simply a blunder of a queen because the rook no longer covers that square. And, you know, she saw like knight a5 is there, but then there's rook a8, and she didn't like that. Also, knight a5, of course, there's queen f5 and b4 and all sorts of ideas. Yeah, Erdogmus wins a nice game. But I think for the second time, Zhu Jiner, she's underperforming. Like the same with Nils Grandelius. He's 0 out of 2, and I'm about to show you his game against Arjun Erigaisi. The thing is, if you feel a bit uneasy from the beginning, and she's definitely the underdog of the field, bad things can happen, you know? She's gonna have to bounce back. And oftentimes, sometimes, same happens with Magnus. You gotta get punched in the mouth a couple times. And that, like, wakes you up a little bit. Not actually. I don't think they're actually punching each other over there in Sweden. Now, in the game, Erigaisi, Grandelius. Erigaisi with the white pieces. Erigaisi is a 2,600 Grandmasters and lower rated than that. He's their worst nightmare. He is probably, by far, the worst matchup for any player below 2,650. Nils is 2,662, but he has lost rating in this tournament because Erigaisi comes to fight. He is either ready to blow you off the board in some ridiculous opening, or he is ready to complicate matters with you. You're going to have to get into it. He's like, Arjun Erigaisi is like the Carlos Praches, okay, of chess. I'm not sure if he's technical and refined enough to become a champion with the grappling and the jiu-jitsu and all that type of stuff. But as far as spinning and stepping elbows and heel kicks and the striking, I mean, goodness me, this means nothing to you if you're not a mixed martial arts fan. Carlos Praches smokes multiple cigarettes before fights. I think Arjun Erigaisi in his hotel room is smoking a cigar and preparing for his games, and then he puts on like battle paint and he just goes to fight. Like this dude is crazy. His nickname is the Madman, I think. So in this game, Nils does it's really bold of him. He plays into a Dragon Sicilian. Erigaisi plays the most principled way in the Dragon, which is develop the bishop, f3, queen d2, and long castle. And the move here for black that tries to equalize is d5. The point of this move is that white now has to play takes, and the best move in this position is a very cutting-edge modern idea, bishop c4. We actually saw this in the candidates tournament, and the idea of bishop c4 is to put the bishop on b3 after black reinforces the middle, like this, and you normally don't get the bishop here. And it also can be a target for an attack, but it does a nice job layering the defenses against the king, and then you start your own attack potentially, and if black is not careful, you will just crush them, or you potentially get an advantageous endgame as black is forced to take on e4. Say, Levy, that was a lot of mumbo jumbo. What are you talking about? If black doesn't immediately take here and open the position, if black thinks that they can get into a battle with you, they can't. Your attack is much faster. If black plays knight takes h5, you have g4, the knight goes back to f6, and this position black can already resign because white is going to go e5 and the game is over. This attack is nothing. That's why this extra layer of defense is very nice. a4 is not a problem. You can take it. You can even ignore it. It doesn't matter because by the time they get here, this is mate. So, having said all that, the way that black has to play this is like this. And this sucks because these pawns are very weak in the long run. And after queen f2, queen c7, this structure is a delight to play for white. I'm not even sure that after queen c7, this was necessarily all. I think both players knew everything very well. So I think Erigaisi here maybe could have went for bishop h6. I think h4 was inaccurate. h4 was a move out of theory. There's some lines here with bishop h6 or knight a4 trying to put the knight on c5. But this position is very nice to play for white because practically speaking, look, black has to take on e4. So the line here for the engine is to take and lose this completely. The point is that after bishop f8, rook f8, the position is actually just equal, which is nuts. It's a rook for a bishop, but the position is equal. I don't know how that's possible. But that's the truth. Now, unless you know that with an engine and you've played practice games, you're probably going to save your rook, and Erigaisi is going to take both of your pawns. So Arjun calls the bluff, takes absolutely all your pawns, and has 3 passed pawns. So this game cannot make it to an endgame. The game must end with blood. Blood must be spilled. The king must be hunted out of where he stands And then you have, right, like that's what you have to do. There's no alternative. So, queen e5. That's mate. Erigaisi goes c3. Queen takes e4. A pawn has been won back. Still, I have 3 passed pawns. If we trade queens and rooks, the game is over. Erigaisi trades 1 pair of rooks and brings rook e1, baiting the opponent into a queen trade. And that is what happens. So this is just about the best case scenario for black. Why? He's in an endgame where both guys are going to push all of their pawns. Except one pawn is surviving and will slow down a little bit of the action here. Otherwise, I'm just going to advance. Can Erigaisi win a sharp endgame? Yes, we know he can win a lot of different positions, but can he win a sharp endgame? A4, rook a8, bishop b6. Apparently, rook a8 was the wrong move. Apparently, black needed to get a head start and then try to bring the bishop back and win this pawn. He goes here. He makes his rook more passive. And this is a lesson for the endgame. You generally should not move your rook to the outside edge of the board. It's just not going to work. It's like there's nothing concrete about this yet, but objectively speaking, you probably need the rook a little bit more active. One of the sample lines here is h5, and if a5 were to be played, bishop f6, you would try to win this back. There would be bishop b6, but the rook can be here and prevent the pawn from advancing on a little bit more of an active square. When Niels plays rook a8, you know, he puts the rook in a corner, and even though that counterplay is still possible, those pawns are now doubled, and bishop c2 comes back. He's going to try to trade and defend actively. He's not going to try to be passive. He also can't. He would literally lose the rook. King b1, and there's Erigaisi. Apparently bishop b4 is the wrong move, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Before bishop e4, the engine wants b4. So it wants b4, h3, and now b5 to sacrifice the pawn to do this. That's the idea, okay? To hit both bishops, and one of them you're going to take with a check. Erigaisi does it like this. His rook is more active than black's rook. h3, he plays king c2. Very sharp endgame. Here, h2 is totally reasonable. The rook is defending. This rook still can't really make any space. It can't get off the back rank at all. If this pawn gets to a7, the endgame is probably just over because the rook won't be able to move to any square. Bishop f4, very sharp. 4 pawns on one side of the board, 3 on the other. Here comes b4. And apparently this is a bad move. Here, you have to play king g7, king g6, king g5, king g4, king h3, and king g2. I am not exaggerating. Look at the top line of the computer. King g7, b5, king g6, c4, king g5, a6, king g4, c5, king g3, c6, king g2, c7, and now h5. Obviously, you morons, how did you not expect that? So the point is that you want to queen this and then have the second one as backup immediately. I mean, that's... Yeah, it's hard to come up with these concepts when you don't have a lot of time. He goes here, but this approach is wrong. Pushing the e-pawn is incorrect. It's too close to the king. He never got his rook in the game. And by the time he activated the rook and the king, you're just not breaking through here. And Erigaisi's pawns are too strong, too fast. Very classy end to this game. You can take the queen, and then I would take your bishop. He promotes to a knight, which is very funny. But then he takes... You can take the queen, then I will take your bishop. You can take my bishop, then I will take your rook. Or play queen g2 check. And that's it. Erigaisi wins another game. He has 2, I think. Yep, he's tied for first now. And the results are as follows. It's a massive tie with 2. Jordan is having a decent tournament with 1.5. This is a tale of 6 individuals that are having a decent tournament and 2 individuals who absolutely everybody is now going to try to defeat. When you start 0-3 or half out of 3, no one's going to try to draw you anymore. And it could be very, very rough for them. And everybody else beating everybody else will be fascinating. I'm kind of sad this tournament is already half over. I mean, I wish we got to see Magnus play much more against Erdogmus, Erigaisi, Keimer, Abdusattorov, Sindarov. Yeah. It kind of sucks in chess that like this is such a temporary thing. That's all I have for you today. If you made it this far, a couple of things are ongoing. Of course, I have the pre-orders for my next book, How to Win at Chess Next Level. There are now signed pre-orders available in Canada, UK, and Europe. That is always linked in the description. And the tour has been announced. Europe Tour 2026 be in Cologne, Amsterdam, Zurich, Paris, and London. So tickets for all that is in the description. We are making also big changes on Chessly. We've got a mobile app coming. You didn't ask for all these updates, but I'm going to give them to you anyway. And yeah, it's going to be fun. It'll be a fun time. That's all. Get out of here.